And then if you want to get rid of that top bar, it's Control Alt Shift H.
Okay.
And then we can minimize the other things for that.
Sure. I want to be able to see Oscar for a second here. All right, yeah. So welcome, and to anybody watching the video, also welcome. If you have never seen me before, I'm Jeff Slye from the math department, and with me today is Oscar Levin, who is one of the many people working on PreTeXt and PreTeXt Plus. And I had asked Oscar if he could give me some materials to share something with my department or perhaps the college, and then he had said, "Hey, well, I can just come in and I can do my usual spiel directly to you." So I'm just here in case anybody would need anything in person, or if he needs to know anything about how things go on campus. And I'm mainly going to leave it to him for the first many parts of this, and so I'll stop sharing my screen very soon here. But if you want to catch up with us, we'll be at PreTeXt Plus sometimes, and I may pull up a few of our projects, or he may pull up a few of our projects as we go along. But yeah, we'll go ahead and let Oscar take the stage. Thanks, Oscar.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and very happy to be here. Thank you for your interest in PreTeXt. I came to PreTeXt probably 10 or 11 years ago. I have written a discrete math textbook. Originally, it was done in LaTeX, and then the early days of PreTeXt, I converted it to that. And since then, I've tried to contribute to the PreTeXt project by making things easier for people to write, instead of having to remember a lot of command line arguments for building stuff. We want to try and make it as easy as possible to get started. And now is a great time to get into PreTeXt. There's a lot more interest because of accessibility issues. As I think we all know, we were all supposed to have all of our course materials be fully accessible this last April. We've gotten a year-long extension, at least in most places. In Colorado, where I usually am, we had to do this already. The state laws were more strict than the federal guidance. But there's this question about how do you take your materials, especially for STEM disciplines. I'm in math, so all the course materials have lots of math symbols and graphs in them. The standard is to write things in LaTeX, which makes beautiful PDFs that are great for printing. But PDFs are notoriously bad for accessibility. I think Adobe would definitely like us to believe that you can make PDFs accessible. And there has been some effort to make the LaTeX produced PDFs better for screen readers. I still think that if you try to read a PDF, even an accessible PDF, using your cell phone, you'll very quickly realize it's not a good experience. You have to navigate back and forth, zoom in. You can't really see stuff on a small screen. And I think that's actually a violation of the WCAG 2.1 AA standards that say you have to be able to zoom in a certain amount, and you have to be able to navigate without going left and right in addition to up and down. So the nice thing about PreTeXt is that the source code you write, the markup that you write for it, can be converted into HTML, which can be read on any web browser, on your phone. It looks great. And it therefore will automatically have screen reader support. We use MathJax for the mathematics, which has really great screen reader support. You can navigate inside the math expression into depth, like the numerator and the denominator of a fraction, for example, and hear both of those separately. PreTeXt takes care of all of the basic accessibility standards that you need, like making sure you can navigate with a keyboard. The HTML we produce just is good quality HTML. But the source that you have can also be translated into a PDF via LaTeX. If you want a print copy, it can be converted into an ePub if you want to use it on your Kindle or iPad. And it can be even converted into Braille. So if you had a student who is blind, you could send your course notes to an embosser. Maybe your Disability Resource Center has a physical embosser to create a Braille version of your course notes. It doesn't have to be transcribed by someone. It just automatically can be converted. So writing in PreTeXt as your source document allows you to do all of these things. In just a minute, I'm going to show you some ways to actually get started writing in PreTeXt and say a little bit more about why it is that the structure of a PreTeXt document allows for all of this and why that is important. I do want to say, though, that there's no way, even in a session that's over an hour, to touch on everything. So please, at any point, jump in, ask questions. I'm happy to shift to other focus as we go. And at the end, I'll give you some opportunities for how you can get more information and be part of the PreTeXt community moving forward if you continue to have questions. So with that, I thought I would show you the new easiest way to get started with PreTeXt, and that is to use a website called PreTeXt.plus. Let me share my screen here. All right. So this is one of the documents that Jeff sent along, the engineering mathematics. And this apparently has already been converted, which looks great. And you can see over here that we have we have some structure. So that's fantastic. And this is maybe where we're going to get to, something like this by the end. But for now, let's go back to the beginning. So if you just go to PreTeXt.plus, this is the site you'll be greeted with. If you go to start writing, if you don't have an account yet, let me sign out so you can see what that looks like. You'll be taken to a try it page here. And maybe this is the place for us to just play around a little bit and get used to what PreTeXt Plus can do. And then we'll actually make a document for ourselves. You can sign up for free. If you don't have an account yet, go ahead and you can create an account. And as long as you use a .edu address, you'll be able to get in. If you don't, I'll need to approve your invite. So if for some reason you can't use a .edu email address, let me know and I will make sure that you get an account. The first thing I want to point out here is that how is the font size for everyone? Is this okay? I can't see anyone's picture now, so.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I think it's good. Yeah.
Okay, very good. First thing you'll notice is that actually I'm writing in LaTeX here. So this is LaTeX style PreTeXt. We have a section tag. This is the way you'd normally start a section. And that says, thanks for trying PreTeXt Plus. And that's the section that was built. Math is done with backslash square brackets. I could, if I wanted regular math, just use dollar signs here, like sine of x equals 0. And to get it refreshed, I just have to do Control S, maybe Control space, no, Control Enter also works. And you can see it renders it just like math. So you're actually not creating a LaTeX document here, even though the syntax that you're using to write your document is done with LaTeX style syntax markup. Behind the scenes, we're actually silently converting this LaTeX into PreTeXt, and then we're using that PreTeXt to build the HTML here. I think this should get you most of the way if you have materials written in LaTeX already that you want to turn into PreTeXt. You can start by just copying them into this editor and seeing what you get. You wouldn't do anything outside of the begin-end document if you were doing this. If you did have macros that you put in your preamble to define things, you can edit those. You can go to the edit preamble, and you can see here that I have \n for blackboard bold here. So because I have that, I could sin of x equals 0 is an element of n, and I don't have to write math bbn to get that nice symbol. So the stuff you would expect to be able to do, the simpler stuff you'd expect to be able to do in LaTeX, you can do using this markup. A lot of stuff that you would have to define special environments for in LaTeX, like theorems, they work out of the box. So I could just do begin theorem and an end theorem. And I could say PreTeXt is really cool. And when I build that, I get this I get a theorem that says that. Theorem 1. I could give that a title in the way you would normally do it. Main result. I believe that gives you a title just like you would expect. So a lot of the LaTeX that you already have will just work this way. When you are ready to move on and add features that are unique to PreTeXt, not everything works great here. You should be able to convert this LaTeX into PreTeXt. You have to be logged in because it's going to create a new project for you. But you'll be able to just convert that directly. While we're here, I'll also show that very recently we started supporting Markdown style PreTeXt. So this, if you write stuff in Markdown, some of my colleagues use Obsidian to just take notes. Markdown is very widely used. You can write in a Markdown variant for this as well. This can be very fast for quickly typing up something up, much faster to write than LaTeX or PreTeXt. I'm going to go ahead and sign in now. I'll pause as I do that and see if anyone has questions at this point.
This is a much later thing, but while you were in that tab with the macros, I saw the image tab, and I've always been a little unclear on how that works in the plus format and what all that supports. So maybe at the end, if we could talk about that.
Yes, I will try to remember to talk a little bit more about images in a little bit here. Thanks. And if I forget, please ask again. All right. I'm going to start by creating a new project. And if you already have something in LaTeX, starting with a LaTeX style PreTeXt project here is definitely the right place to start. So I'm going to call this just demo worksheet. You can always change this later. And I'll have LaTeX style PreTeXt as my source, and I will go and create a project. And this editor should look exactly like we had before. We just have some basic example here. I'm going to go ahead and I just wanted to show you that we could easily take what we started with in LaTeX and transition to real or classic PreTeXt very easily. All you have to do is go click convert to PreTeXt. That will pop up a box that will show you what the PreTeXt version of that looks like. I think this should also help you learn how to do things in PreTeXt if you're not sure. And you can see this is what we're going to get. So I'm actually going to go ahead and create a copy of this so I can start editing the PreTeXt version. When I do that, it'll take me to this demo worksheet, but this is the PreTeXt version of that project. If I went back to my projects, you would see that I have now two, one in LaTeX style and one in classic PreTeXt. Okay, I want to talk a little bit just about what this document that we're looking at is made up of. And For those of you who teach any sort of anything involving functions, whether that's in math or maybe in computer programming, when we talk about functions, you know that the composition of functions is well modeled by thinking about boxes inside of boxes. And it's the same model that we want to think about when we think about an actual document. A document really is a sequence of nested boxes. I'm going to switch over here to the simple preview. No, I'm not. Never mind. Forget I did that. Sometimes it works better than others. It's because we have extra stuff here. If we think about what this document contains, the whole thing is a document. And we can see in PreTeXt here, it starts with a section. There's a section box that contains other boxes. In fact, because this is a nice code editor, you can fold things. So I can close that and you can see, yeah, this is a section box. Inside my section box, I have some other boxes. The first box I have is a title box. The title box contains content, this text. So you open up your section box, inside it you see some other boxes. One of them is called title, and that's inside the title box. You open it up, you have some content. Next to the title box, I have a paragraph box. And this paragraph box is denoted by angle brackets P. That contains some content. It contains content including this empty solid box that says LaTeX that just makes the nice LaTeX sort of fonts over there. It also contains an M box, which is the box that contains math symbols. And the math symbols, the syntax for math symbols is exactly what you'd expect from LaTeX. It is just LaTeX. Between the M tags is exactly the same as between the dollar signs when you have a LaTeX document with math in it. There's not anything there, or dot, 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 I don't know. For this first paragraph box, I have another paragraph box. And actually, this is good because this didn't convert the way I wanted it to. So we can see how to fix that. Well, so if I look at my content, I have, for example, you can write math using LaTeX syntax like this inline math or this math display. Well, that's all part of the same paragraph. Why have I split that paragraph into two boxes? I shouldn't have. The better way to think about this would be to just delete those two. And now I just have a single paragraph box that has text, a couple LaTeX atomic blocks, a inline math box, and a display math box. Now, when I recompiled that, the output doesn't look that different. Actually, I should probably put a period after that math display. I'm going to put the period outside of the MD box because it's text, it's not part of the math, but PreTeXt is smart enough to know that it should go just be displayed up there. And this is the key reason that we can ensure that the output is going to meet accessibility requirements. We have described semantically this whole paragraph. It doesn't select the math very nicely. The paragraph from this is a sample all the way to the end of that equation. That whole thing is a paragraph block. If you imagine being a reader who requires a keyboard to navigate things, or a blind reader, and they start listening to this paragraph. They say, oh, I've already read that paragraph. I'm going to hit the key that jumps me to the next paragraph. We want to be able to do that and actually know where that next paragraph is. As visual readers, we can infer that because there's not a period after the or, that we mean for this equation to be part of that same logical paragraph. We're used to inferring meaning about our documents based on visual layout of what we're looking at. But a blind student doesn't have that that set of hints that we are used to having. So keeping your document described in this semantic way is the key thing you need to think about when you're trying to create accessible documents. If we continue on here, we have another paragraph box. We just hide the content of these because we're just looking at the structure. Then there is another paragraph box. This paragraph box has a box that is quotes. You don't have to worry about doing the 2 backticks and the 2 apostrophes for begin quotes and end quotes. They are begin Q and end Q. This is PreTeXt is a variant of XML. The way you describe things, the way you start and end things is always with the element name and angle brackets, and you end it with the element name and angle brackets with a / beginning it. This is nice. If you happen to be writing something in French, the quotes that you use for French when you're writing in French are not the standard bunny ears that we have. They're these sort of like angle brackets, but pushed together. PreTeXt knows that if your language is set to French, that it use those kind of quotes. You don't have to change your markup to do that. Okay, so anyway, so we have another paragraph there. We have another paragraph there. Ooh, and now we're to a new type of box. The new type of a box is a theorem. The theorem box, right now, it just has a statement box. And inside the statement box, there is a paragraph box. I could have added a title box. The title is, say, my theorem. So now there are 2 boxes inside of theorem. One of them is the title, the next one is the statement. You could also provide a proof of a theorem. And a proof is its own box. Inside the proof box, there's a paragraph. There are nice autocompletes. That's how I was able to type that so quickly. I just started typing, and I saw that that was the first one that's collected, so I hit enter, and it fills it in. That should speed up writing a lot. Obvious. And if I save that, now notice that the way that, okay, so it looks like there was already a proof that was part of the conversion. There's also this weird thing. I'll say what that is in a second. So that's why we see 2 proofs down here. That proof is the one I just wrote. Proofs by default are hidden under what we call in PreTeXt knowls, KNOWLS. It stands for a little bit of knowledge, a little block of knowledge. It's just these hidden drop downs. There are ways to turn that off if you're using the full PreTeXt setup. But the nice thing is, we as the PreTeXt developers, the creators of PreTeXt, have decided that the most elegant or useful way to display this visually is to have a box around the statement of the theorem and then have the proof of it follow it in one of these drop downs. Again, thinking about accessibility, it's also nice for a blind reader to know that this proof is a proof of this theorem because it lives in there. And we can, in fact, if you look at the code for the website, the proof and the theorem box are together in a bigger block. They belong together in some way. You can put a proof by itself. There might be times where you want to have some content between the statement of the theorem and the proof of the theorem, and that's okay as well. This blank P, this is a self-closing tag in XML. It's a P with, and then the slash is right there. It's exactly the same as writing this, a box with nothing in it. That is just a fragment of the LaTeX conversion. Maybe there were too many spaces in the original between the theorem and the proof. So that's why that was inserted. We can just delete that. It's not needed. And we could have easily put this proof, move that up inside of the theorem. Maybe a theorem has 2 proofs. That's totally fine. The output's going to look the same in this output format, but for the input format. it now has this meaning that we have two proofs inside the theorem that has that statement. There are lots and lots of different types of boxes that make up a PreTeXt document. If you go to the help menu here, you can go to the PreTeXt guide. I think that's going to open up a new tab. Good. If you go to the basics reference, you have a lot of these listed. This is a good place to get started if you want to know what sort of things are possible. Document structure, mathematics. We're talking about blocks here. The blocks include theorem-like elements, example-like elements, axiom-like elements, and so on. And in fact, if I look at these, we just talked about a theorem, but things that are synonyms of theorem are algorithm, claim, corollary, fact, identity, lemma, and proposition. Those all have the same format. They're the same type of box, just with different names, because you might want to call something a lemma and something a theorem. They'll have different names. But you can see here, this is the standard format for that kind of box. Oh, I didn't put a creator in there, but you can also have a creator as a sub box, a child of the theorem box. Theorems are different than axioms. An axiom does not have a proof, and you're not allowed to put a proof inside an axiom. You wouldn't expect one. We're describing our source semantically, so we're saying these kinds of boxes have these other types of boxes as allowable children. Sometimes you have to have this particular inside box if you have this particular type of outside box. And at its core, that's what PreTeXt is. PreTeXt is a list of rules for which boxes are allowed to go in which other boxes. Okay. So that's a little bit about what it means to write a PreTeXt document, to start thinking about your document as structured in this way that allows you to have the accessibility requirements. I'll again pause and see if there are questions about what I've just said. The next thing we'll do is see how you could take something like this and maybe make it into a worksheet that you could give to your students and print out nicely. But are there any questions before we go on to
that? First, I just want to say to Oscar's point that it sounds simple to say like, oh, of course, you know, we can see where paragraphs are. But if we think about the different ways that we've seen people create LaTeX documents, some people use the two slashes. I always forget which one's forward and which one's backward all these years later, versus somebody using new line or maybe new page to skip over something, or using a V space after not ending the paragraph. And so there is not usually a standard way amongst all of us that we create paragraphs. And so then when the PDF is created and then you have to go back and make it accessible, that can be a nightmare depending on, you know, for just the paragraphs, depending on how you ended up making those paragraphs visually. The other question that I had for you, which I think I probably know the answer, but does XML and thus PreTeXt care about indenting technically, even though it's good practice?
It does not. In general, these white space characters, like whether I do it like this or do something, you know, visually uncomfortable like that, or put a bunch of new lines there, you're going to get exactly the same output. It really is just to help us understand the structure. It will confuse the text editor if you do that kind of stuff about where things should be folded sometimes. So it is nice to keep things indented. You can always go up to this Format PreTeXt button and it will try to make it look nicer for you. But yeah, don't worry about that when you're typing. The only exception to that is that there might be times where you want to write something like a program, say you do a program in Python, and your input, if you wanted to describe a program in Python, you might say something like def f of x, and then the next one is going to be indented. You say like return 3 or 4 times x. And now if I build that, you can see here that that preserved the indentation. And if I wanted to show like how not to write Python, I could do it like that, and it will preserve that. So there are various verbatim environments where, of course, you would inside of that you would care about the indentation, but in general, for the general structure, you do not need to worry about that, and it'll make no difference. PreTeXt is smart about when to do that and when not to, and the formatter should be smart about this too, and it should correct weird formatting outside of that and leave formatting inside of that alone.
Cool. I never even knew what the format PreTeXt button did. Awesome.
Yeah, it's getting better too. Someone just contributed some fixes to that recently. Okay, let's say that we wanted to create an activity for our students. When I teach, I often bring a printout of some worksheet, not really a worksheet, some sort of activity on paper for students to do. And there's some space for them to write some stuff to explore. I am going to just kind of clean this up a little bit. I think, in fact, I'm just going to completely start over. I'm going to get rid of all of that and just start writing something new. Instead of a section, I'm going to call this a worksheet. So my main box is going to be called a worksheet instead of a section. Other than that, it's not going to make much difference. Just leave it as a worksheet for now. Maybe I will give this worksheet a title. I'll say first day activity, since it's not too much longer until the fall semester starts. Maybe I will add a paragraph here and say something like, welcome to class. Instead of reading the syllabus, let's do some math. Okay. And now I'm going to give them some tasks to do, and I'm going to structure these tasks as exercise boxes. So each task, each thing that I want them to do is going to be, I'm just going to call it an exercise. And the first suggestion I have here is an exercise with workspace. And if I select that, it just gives me this extra word here inside my starting tag. Workspace equals and then quotes. And I'm going to give them 1 inch to do that space, 1 inch of workspace there. Workspace only has any effect if you're inside a worksheet or a handout division, because those are the only things where we would expect you to have space to do any writing. Let me do a statement of this, and say something like, first, write down your favorite fact about math you remember from high school. I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go along. That's my exercise. Okay. After that first exercise, let's maybe do another exercise. I'm not going to put any workspace on this because I'm going to structure this exercise slightly different. I'm going to structure it as a scaffolded exercise that's going to have a couple parts to it, a couple tasks for that one exercise. So before I do any of those, I'm going to give an introduction to this. Now let's do some derivatives. I don't know. the first task, and I could do task. I'm going to do task with workspace now. Maybe I'll give this 2 inches of work. Use the limit definition of the derivative to find mtag f prime of x for f of x equals 3x squared plus 1. I don't know why we do that on the first day of calculus, but let's say that we did that. And the second task is now use the power rule to find the derivative of the same function. I don't know. I didn't give any workspace there. They probably don't need as much workspace. So I'm going to add the attribute workspace. The words inside tags that aren't the name of the tag are called attributes. Maybe I'll just do 0.5 inches. Okay. And then let's do an exercise with workspace 1 inch again. And a statement. What are you most excited about learning in this course? Something like that. Okay, let's see what that looks like. So I Control S to save. And I see here, okay, I have the overall document is called demo worksheet, and I have a first day activity as the title, it's class, and then I have these 3 exercises. There's no workspace there, but I don't think there should be because this is the online version that I might give them. Let's go see what I can do with this now. I'm going to save this. Okay, so there I have that. And if I want to give this to my students, or if I want to maybe make it available on, we use Canvas here, or whatever LMS you're using. I'll go to Share Output. And now this is its own web page. You can see up here, this is PreTeXt.plus/projects, and then some random string /share. To get this to my students, what I would do is I would go up to this little embed button. When I open that, I see some code that I can copy and put it inside of my LMS page. And if you have done anything like this, you'll see this is just an iframe, which is a nice way to embed another web page inside another web page. I'll copy that. And I will now open up a new tag and go to Canvas for me. There we are. Log in. Just go to a development course I have. And maybe I just want to make a new page, or I could make this as an assignment. Usually I just do this as pages. If I do a syllabus, this is what I would do. I'd create a new page. Let's say first day activity there. And there are a couple of ways you could do this. You could go to the code, the HTML view for the whole page in Canvas. There's also the very end of all of the rich text editor controls is this little cloud thing for embedding. Click that, it gives you a box, and you just paste it right there and insert it. And you can see most of it there, but you can see that I have that first day activity here now in Canvas. And if I go over here to save, I can save and publish. This is what students would see when they go to that page in Canvas. They'd see this version. Again, still no workspace, but it's an online thing, so they can just do this. So when I do give my students homework, these are the sort of things I do. I just take my PreTeXt documents that are published, and I put them in Canvas like this. Now, if I'm going to print out this worksheet to bring to class. Or maybe a student missed class and they need to print out a version so they can fill it out and bring it to my student hours, my office hours. You can just go to this little print icon here. When you do that, it flashes for some reason. You can see that we have now it looks like a page because I've styled it that way for you as part of PreTeXt, but you can see I have a title here, and I do have this workspace. I have an inch of workspace here. In fact, students, if they wanted to, could even type in here. And if they did that, it would save it, but there's no reason they need to do that. It's just a nice little bonus feature. You have this, you have, scroll down, you have 2 inches of workspace there, 1 inch of workspace there, and a little bit of workspace at the end as well. The margins are default here. We could have changed those using attributes of the worksheet you saw earlier. What I really like doing is I like adding a first page header. So I might call this like Math 102, and I might over here call this Spring 20. Oh, that's done. Fall 2026. And now if I go to my print dialog, I'm not sure you can see that because it's not in there, but I will get my regular print dialog. It'll load it up and it will let me print. It's looking for a printer here and I'm not at my home network. So I need to somehow tell it to not do that anymore. Oh no.
You mind if I try and take a look at it on our
Yes. No,
okay.
Please do that because my computer got freaked out. So
Yes. So let's see. If I share, will it cancel out? Yes. Okay. All right. So let's see. So let's see, anywhere in Brightspace that you can put HTML code. So like if I go to the description of this module, and then if I go to the ... menu, more actions, and then I go to source code, then that's where I can plop it in. I didn't make a worksheet. Oscar, would you be able to plop in the link that you had into the chat?
I think so. Well, I say that, but my
So if we want to print it as a worksheet, we have to first post it somewhere?
you could do this from PreTeXt Plus. There we go. Zoom.
Yeah, when we get the link, I can show you.
Okay, that's the iframe that I copied.
Okay.
If you write something on PreTeXt Plus and you save it, you get that share link automatically. And so that exists now on the web and you can embed it that way.
And then in Brightspace, it'll say, do you want to trust this? So we always want to trust that one, and then it'll be available. All right. And then we have the options from before. Oscar, do you have control of your screen again?
I do. It finally.
Do you think, are you able to hit the print button while you're still in share, not share, oh my gosh, I just went back a decade, not share LaTeX. In PreTeXt Plus, do you have that button?
Yes. So
you'll need to share again because I stole it from you.
So either in Canvas, in your LMS in Brightspace, you can hit the print button there. Or there we go. If you're on that share link, you can hit this print thing and you can print it from there. Just fine. The weirdness right now is if you're on this page and you hit it, it just duplicates it. And if you are, go back. If you are editing things, currently this preview, clicking that does also not work. But once you save it and you go to the actual project and go to the share page, you can print it from there. I should say, and I should have said this already, that, yeah, it's fine. PreTeXt Plus is just one way to write PreTeXt. We're trying to make it like the Overleaf, but for PreTeXt. My collaborators did not like the name Underbrush instead of Overleaf, but so we went with PreTeXt Plus instead. There are other ways to write in PreTeXt. And what I do for my own courses is I have PreTeXt installed on my computer. So I do all the building. I write the markdown and I convert it and build it on my own computer. And I print it even just from my web browser without posting it anywhere. I did this last semester for all of my exams. I made my exams as worksheets. I didn't post them anywhere. They weren't on the web. But because they were on my computer and I built them, I was able to hit the same print button, get the headers the way I wanted, and then print them and bring those exams to classes. So that's also an option for you. It just takes a little bit more to get that set up. And depending on how much administrative control you have over your computer, it can be easier or harder.
I like to think of this as sort of the kiddie pool in terms of trying to get your toes wet with it. So Zoe, this would be, instead of creating a single article or worksheet or something in PreTeXt Plus, then eventually with just regular old PreTeXt, it's kind of funny that regular PreTeXt is a superset of Plus. Anyway,
Yes.
If you go to all the tools of PreTeXt, then you can have an entire course or an entire book or whatever. And then any of these worksheet elements would all each come with their own print button that the students can use or you could use, etc.
Yeah,
But
this is the course. This is
like,
the course
this is just the intro.
Right,
I definitely
absolutely.
need the like most basic version. I just know I'm often like frantically preparing some change to some worksheet just before the class starts, and like I post it on Brightspace a week later. And can I skip the like posting it on Brightspace? But it's okay if that's
You absolutely can. And that's a very good point. I mean, one of the things I really like about this workflow is that I'm also preparing for class in the hour before class. So I might even find a typo during class. Like my students discovered that I messed up something. Even if I'd already posted it in this way, if it was live, that embed link is pointing to your live website. So if I could go back then into my PreTeXt document, correct it, rebuild it, and it's automatically fixed inside of my LMS. I don't have to re-upload it. I don't have to worry about, do my students have the most recent version? This is the course I use for my linear algebra. I had a whole PreTeXt book of course materials. There was a syllabus, at the end there was a course survey, had notes for each week, and then I had my in-class activities. Those were very similar to the things we just saw. So each of these in-class activities is its own PreTeXt worksheet that can be printed separately. I embedded each of those separately. It will remember what you have for the headers. So like every time I go back here, it would be the same number, so I don't have to correct that each time. So once you get more advanced, you could really have your whole course organized around these PreTeXt documents and embed just the ones you want. Okay, so I should say something a little bit about images. In PreTeXt Plus right now, as of today, there is one choice for embedding graphics, and that is to use markup called prefigure. Prefigure is to figures what PreTeXt is to text, created by a friend of the PreTeXt ecosystem, David Austin. Really great accessible diagram authoring system. I'm just going to show this to you a little bit. This is going to load a live editor for playing around with it. If you look at the code for prefigure, you see it looks very similar to PreTeXt. It's XML as well, but a different set of boxes. So this, once it loads, it takes a little time to load the first time. You have a diagram for the whole thing. Inside of that diagram, you have a definition that says what the function is, another definition for the point or for the value a equals 1. That's over here, a equals 1. you describe your coordinate boxes, and that you can give annotations to this. So even though annotations isn't quite working in PreTeXt Plus right now, I don't know, did you hear that? I hit the down arrow.
Oh,
that was the end.
do you have audio on your computer?
Is it? Yeah, let me hold on.
I don't think you're sharing audio right now.
Well, let me fix that. Because this is pretty awesome. There we go. Share sound.
The coordinate grid and axis. The coordinate grid. The coordinate axis.
Those
The
dots
coordinate
are called...
grid. The coordinate grid. The graph of a function and its tangent line at the point a equals 1. The coordinate grid and the graph and its tangent line. The graph of the function f. The point a comma f of a.
So you can navigate this just using your keyboard and get basically here are these annotations if you write in Prefigure. Prefigure is also great because you can it can create tactile versions of
the graph of a function and its tangent line at the point a equals 1.
Stop that. Okay, sorry. It will figure out where to put the labels, so the Braille labels don't interact with don't mess up the well, don't bump into each other in particular and mess with the lines. And if you had a Braille embosser that could do this, you could print this out and it would actually have raised dots for the graph. So a blind student could actually feel what this graph was. So Prefigure is great, and Prefigure works inside of PreTeXt. So I could take this diagram, I'm going to copy that, go back over to, yep, there. Now I deleted it. Okay. Go back to projects. Let's put this inside this exercise here. Paste that in. The diagrams do not work. Oh, sorry, the annotations do not work right now. That's going to get fixed. It's just broken currently. They would work in full PreTeXt. So I have that. And the only other thing I need to do, well, I need to put this in a image box. And I think a prefigure and XML s equals I believe I need to do that as well. Nope, didn't like that. Oh, because I forgot to put a label on it. Weird. There we go. Now I have that image inside my PreTeXt document. And if I saved that and went to the share, or just was back in my activity here, and I reload this inside my learning management system, you see I have that image there. It's very big. I should have put a width on that to make it smaller. But even if I go to print it now, it's going to put on the new page because it's so big. But it still gives me workspace in between them. So Prefigure can work already in PreTeXt Plus. Outside of PreTeXt Plus, and honestly coming soon to PreTeXt Plus, you can put other images there. If we look at This is the basics reference of the PreTeXt guide in Figures and Friends. You can have images. So you could include an image from a source file that you have. If you have like a JPEG or a PNG, you could upload that, or you could put that into your document and it could embed that. And you can also do LaTeX-generated images. If you have stuff that is already in done in TXE, if you know what that is, TXE pictures work as well. You just put them inside an image and a LaTeX image. That requires you have LaTeX installed, and PreTeXt Plus doesn't have that wired up yet, but it will soon. So you can get these diagrams and they will then show up. They'll be embedded in the web page automatically once you have compiled them. So that's a nice way to programmatically or in your source describe your image. That is what, yeah, go ahead.
I know that that's not on Plus, and that's just in the extended, even more to learn area. But with the TXZ, is it just vanilla TXZ, or can you use various TXZ specific packages?
Right. So the thing you saw under the preamble, the image macros, up there, you could do things like use TXZ library. There's TXZ library commands you can have there. So you would put that, again, not on PreTeXt Plus, but you could have that as part of your doc info for your PreTeXt document. And you could load those extra sets of macros in there and TXZ. In fact, you can put any LaTeX code you would want in there, and things that are inside LaTeX image. All it does is it takes that LaTeX and what's ever in your image macros, compiles it using LaTeX, and then turns that into an SVG. So you have a lot of flexibility there. If you prefer to use a different LaTeX image creator like XYPic, is that a thing? You can use that as well. There's also support for asymptote and SagePlot as part of PreTeXt for creating images dynamically as well.
And then do you know when on the roadmap just regular old images are set for Plus at all? Roughly plus or minus 1 month or something?
1 month or 3 weeks plus or minus 1 week is what I would say.
Okay.
My collaborator who's working on PreTeXt Plus with me, we were at a workshop this week and we got it mostly working, but I'm about to go on vacation. So it'll take this next week. He'll continue working on it. And then the week after that, we should have it ready. And you should be able to upload images and include them as well. Okay. I think at this point, I'm just going to throw it out for questions. What other things would you like to know about? I can show you lots of other different things, but hopefully this gives you an idea of what's possible and why PreTeXt is awesome. So yeah, what are your questions?
Fortunately, it's 3 o'clock on a Friday.
I understand, yes.
Let's see here. So just going back to let's see. So here, this was Rasika's. And then I can share these with the department to see like sort of what turned out and what didn't turn out from. This was just an automatic conversion and then a cleanup by an AI. So I mean, it's looking pretty good. I guess the caveat here is because it's not like I didn't make the examples a worksheet. I don't have space built in for like I don't even have a print button, so to speak. Would you have any sort of way for Rasika in PreTeXt Plus to get back some of, well, I mean, to get it printable as a fill in the notes sort of thing and to get that space in there? Would you just turn this whole thing into a worksheet or?
If you wanted to have a document that was a sort of scaffolded notes document,
Yeah.
The recommended way to do that is instead of a worksheet or a section, to call it a handout.
Mm-hmm.
So just go to the top of the document and change section, or this, in this case, probably it looks like a subsection of that. Okay, right. So right now also you have it as a book with a chapter and a section. And in PreTeXt Plus, you really just need the section.
Well, again, this was sort of an AI.
Right, of course.
So if we, and I'll go to the bottom later. So you said try and make it a handout?
Yeah, handout. We'll get rid of those. Good.
Oh, what did I miss? My handout line 16.
Oh, it might be multiple. It looks like it has multiple sections.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Why don't you just Control Z back to where that was a section at the bottom. If you click on the three bars on the left-hand side, okay. Scroll down. Did you put back the? Because we have the handout at the top. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to go find where that section ended.
Oh.
But that works. So now you can see that. In fact, if you click on sequences and series, next to that, there's a little pencil icon. You can click that. And you can change it from a section to a handout as the type.
Okay.
Hit save. And then if you go back to edit full document, you can see that the handout switch for you. And now if you save it, you'll see that you now have that that initial section, the sequences and series part, is a handout.
Mm-hmm. I know we don't have space right now, but I forgot to
share output.
That's right. This is a good reminder for everybody here. Okay, and then I guess the space is there because I think the AI tried to put the space in there originally.
Yeah, we could look at the source to see what it's doing with that.
Maybe?
Yep. So example workspace 3 inches.
Okay. Yep.
And that's the way you'd add space. In a handout, pretty much any block level element can take a workspace attribute and I'll try to put space after it.
Okay.
Whereas in a worksheet, it's really just exercises and tasks that should get workspace.
Yep.
So that's
that with Rasika's use case, that'll definitely be helpful.
Right. I mean, you could change each of those individually to handouts, and now you have a bunch of handouts in this one document. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't be able to embed individual ones into Brightspace, but you'd be able to print individual ones, each one separately.
And then here we have Dinu's syllabus. Any sort of things from the conversion plus AI that you would suggest making it any different? I
mean, that looks very good. The thing at the instructor and email and stuff, I'm thinking that's probably turned in a table.
Yeah, because the original was a 2-column table.
Right. And I suppose that is fine. Probably not very accessible right now because you have like heading columns in the middle right? So it's almost like you have two tables next to each other, even though it's one table. So, right, it's coded up as a tabular, which does that. A way to get that sort of information where you have instructor and then what the instructor is, the email, what the email is, would be to use a description list. So
Okay.
to, instead of using an ordered list or an unordered list, you just use a DL. And
Okay.
then each list item, which would be an LI, it gets a title. So you'd have like title was instructor, and then you would put in the name of the instructor. And same for all of those. That's the way that I've structured my Slye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we just have a few minutes left. Is that right?
I think 320 technically.
320. Okay. So I want to say just a couple more things to wrap up here then. First of all, some resources, in addition to the help that you get on PreTeXt Plus for the official documentation. There is, I'm putting it in the chat right now, pfi.mathtech.org. I'll share my screen so I can point to things. Is at least a start of a more of a tutorial for using PreTeXt for instructors. So you can see a demo course of what it's going to eventually build, what you will build if you follow this tutorial. You go to the full tutorial, you get to a PreTeXt book that I'm working on. You can see I haven't updated it recently. But this goes through setting up PreTeXt on your own computer or using GitHub code spaces. I know GitHub can be scary. Lots of people think that GitHub is for programmers, but you should really think of it like Google Drive. It's a place where you can store files online, but it also has some other cool features. One of those is that you can write PreTeXt stuff using what is called a GitHub code space, where you get the same experience you'd get if you did everything locally, but you don't have to install anything on your own computer. It just installs everything in your web browser for you. So it'll go through that. It'll talk about the way to create, build, view, and deploy a PreTeXt project if you don't want to use PreTeXt Plus, if you want to try to have a whole course. So it'll go through a tutorial for that. It'll suggest ways to organize your course, like the linear algebra course I was showing earlier. And it currently has stuff about a syllabus, maybe stuff about notes. Nope, notes are coming soon. That's where I stopped. I stopped after writing the syllabus. So this is a structure that you could use for a syllabus if you wanted to. Again, not using PreTeXt Plus, but trying to do this using the original or classic way of doing PreTeXt. And there's some stuff down in the bottom here. So I hope to be adding more stuff to this, but that's a good place to go if you want to dive in and start writing course materials with PreTeXt or converting them. So that's one option, one resource I wanted to mention. The other is just at mathtech.org. This is basically a blog site that my colleagues and I have started with cool things you can do with technology in math. But I want to point out that we have a calendar here, and on the calendar there are we have some workshops, virtual workshops that will be posted here. But every week you will see that there are on Tuesdays and on Thursdays, there are drop-ins, and we offer drop-in office hours on Zoom to help you with getting started with PreTeXt or other things. The drop-ins on Tuesdays from 1 to 3 Central, because I'm in Central time zone right now, hosted by Virginia and Dwayne. Those are for Donut. Donut is an open source platform for writing interactive exercises. That's what I was doing this last week. It's a workshop there. Really cool stuff. And you could put those inside of PreTeXt now too. But the ones, Rob and Oscar, the Tuesday morning ones and the Thursday morning ones, I'm there and we just hang out on Zoom and we do our own stuff unless there are people who have questions. So if you're getting started and you just get stuck on something and you want a little help getting unstuck, please drop by. You all probably have the same problems that I do getting students to come to your office hours. And you try to tell them that, no, we really want you to come to your student hours. The student hours, they're for you. And they don't want to because they're intimidated. I don't want you to be intimidated to come to these either. Pretend like you are a student and you are not intimidated to come to these office hours. We have them here to help you on your PreTeXt journey. So do that. You're free to drop in. Don't have to make an appointment or anything. Just whenever you have questions. You just want to hang out with your camera off and have people talking about cool math stuff, math ed tech stuff in the background. It's a good time to block off some time and get some work done. So there are those resources. The other site, pretextbook.org. This is the main website for PreTeXt. It does have the full guide, PreTeXt guide, that I was showing you here that had the basic reference. There is also, if you go to the online PreTeXt schema viewer browser there, that's yet another thing of reference. All of the tags, all the different types of boxes that you might want in PreTeXt are listed here. Some of them are, actually, I think we just finished this recently. So it tells you exactly what it's for. An assemblage is an element that uses a summary callout box. And it tells you what things it can have inside of it and what things it can go inside. And it gives you some examples with previews, in fact. So that's a good place if you're just curious about what things are possible, or if you're not sure if putting an aside, if you're allowed to put aside inside a paragraph, you can see, well, what are its parents? Its parents can be lots of things, but there is no P. So you can't put an aside inside a P. You have to put it next to a P tag. So that's useful. The other very useful document is if you go to examples here and you scroll down to the sample article, or actually, let me show you the sample book. There are annotated versions of the sample book and the sample article. These are used primarily for testing purposes, but they're made available for all of us who want to write stuff as well. I wanted to call out this runestone testing section of the chapter book, of the sample book. There are lots of things you can put inside a PreTeXt document. For instance, you can put YouTube videos in there. So here's a YouTube video right inside your PreTeXt document. And the nice thing about the annotated version is you can view the source for that section, and you can see this is how you would put that YouTube video in there. You'd have a video element that would, you can see what the margins are, but you basically just give it that YouTube ID as YouTube equals, and that's how you get a YouTube video in there. You can put little exercises there, like what color is a stop sign? That's red. Yay, I got it right. So if you want to have little checkpoints for students to try things as they're reading some notes online and get some instant feedback, you can easily do that. And the source code for doing a multiple choice question is, it's an exercise, it's a title, IDX is for the index, if you want to create an index for a larger thing, a statement, and then you do choices. And the choice, you could have green as one of your choices. Choice is a statement. So the statement, there's a paragraph that says green. You could even have feedback It says green means go. And that's what you would see if I said, oh, a stop sign is green. No, green means go. So you can see all of that stuff. And there are lots of other cool things you can do in here, including one thing that I've been using a lot recently. Here, Parsons problems. Parson problems are like if I'm doing something with proofs, you could say, I want to try to prove this theorem. Here are a bunch of statements. I want to drag them over. Maybe I think that's what the proof should be. I click check, and it says, nope, answer's too short. They're not enough. So you can drag and drop things around. So if you're curious about what things you can do that are beyond just writing the basic notes, this is a nice resource for getting ideas and seeing how to do them. Let's see. I think you now have everything you need to do a lot of PreTeXt work, especially knowing that you can always come ask for help. So I will stop there and happy to answer more questions and stick around for a little bit. But thank you all for being here and let me know how I can help.
Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you.
Of course.
And I'll be sure to share a lot of those links. I'll probably scrub back through the video and collect them and send them out to the department.
Wonderful.
All right. John, anything to? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'll see you around in cyberspace.
Yep. Thanks again for organizing this.
Yeah.
Have a slide.
Yep.